Yeah, fair drinkum.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Interview with a Homebrewer. I think we're at episode 5, if I'm not mistaken. Once this episode is out, it's episode 5. We are joined by Shari from Crafted Taste Homebrew Supplies up in Queensland, also known as Shari BrewCrew on TikTok and Instagram, etc. First of all, welcome. And how was your day?
My day was really good. It's Friday, so
That's
knocking
always
back
a
a
win.
couple.
Yep,
That's exactly right.
I love it. I love it. And obviously, my first question for all of my homebrew guests is, what's your earliest memory of homebrew?
So my earliest memory is not specifically brewing, but I
Mm-hmm.
probably would have been all of 6 or 7.
Mm-hmm.
And Dad had kicked us out to the front of the local home brew shop, which, if my memory serves me,
Mm-hmm.
I think we were there probably quite a bit. He might say otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this big fish pond. And I remember my brother and I used to just sit there and watch the fish. Um, Dad would go in and get Dad's stuff, and then he'd come home and he'd mix it up. And I can remember the god awful smell. I remember as a kid just thinking, God, how do you drink that?
Yeah, because it
It
tastes
was
nothing like it smells.
putrid.
Yep.
Now as an adult, it doesn't smell as bad when you're mixing it up as what I remember it to be. But that would be probably one of my first
Yep.
memories of homebrew.
That's awesome. Um, and obviously you just alluded to that, Dad was always around the homebrew shop, the homebrew scenes, that sort of stuff, which leads me to my next question. You grew up around the industry because your parents own um crafted taste homebrew. So what was that like growing up around the industry, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, so Craft a Taste was founded in 2017. So I was
Mm-hmm.
well
Well and
an
truly not a child
adult.
then. Yep.
Yeah, well an adult and out of home. So there's lots of things that kind of led them to that point. I guess Dad has brewed for almost 2 decades.
Yep.
So, and I think like any home brewer, you'll generally go through like ups and downs. You'll brew for a bit, you won't brew. You brew for a bit. Now, what led them to I guess, finding crafted taste is their own story, but
Mm-hmm.
essentially they decided to start a home brew shop in 2017. I had never had a real interest in it. Like I
Oh wow.
knew Dad had brewed. I'd never ever paid attention. The most I ever did as a kid was sit there and force carb his kegs and sit there and shake them.
Yep.
And I swear he only let us do that because we were like, what are you doing? What are you?
And it saved him
You know,
having to do it.
we want to do we want to do something. I think I have one memory of attempting to put bottle caps like crownies
Yep.
on the tallies.
Yep.
But it wasn't ever something that was there all the time.
Okay.
Um, they started in 2017, so I'd pop down to the shop occasionally. I had a little fella who was about
Mm-hmm.
2 at the time, so he used to really enjoy going in there, and they would pay him to wipe down the shelves, or
I love that. Yep.
so that he felt like he was doing his bit. But still, I didn't really have that much of an interest. My interest was going to the breweries or to the pub and trying the different beers because Dad wanted to try something different or support the local brewery or whatever that was.
Yep.
Um, Come 2020, they offered me a job with them, to
Okay.
which my first response was, what are you offering me a job for? Because
Yeah, like
I
why?
know nothing
Yeah.
about what yous are doing.
Yep.
I come from a very different field and background. And they
What
kind of
was
said,
that background, if you don't mind me asking? Like going from something that's totally different to homebrewing shop.
yeah, so I had 10 years in dental.
Wow.
And while I was there, I completed a degree as a naturopath. So at the
Yep.
time, I was a practicing naturopath,
Yep.
which, is
Very
very
different.
different.
Yeah.
Um, but anyway, like I said, sure, like I guess I can stand there and serve customers. I don't know what real help I'm going to be.
Yep.
Um, but I guess once you get in there, um, it's like a
It's a
bug and
bug.
you
It's
just
literally a
hatch
bug.
it.
Yep. Every single person, including myself, it's a bug. As soon
Yeah.
as you get into it, you go down that wormhole.
Right. And I think as well, like I had obviously a very vested interest being the family business. Like I wanted to do well. The initial plan was it wasn't going to be a long-term thing.
Mhm.
Um, the initial plan was about 12 months.
Yep.
Anyway, we've just passed 4 years.
I was gonna say, was this for
Um,
yourself working there, or was it for the
yes.
business?
No, for myself.
Wow, congratulations.
Um, Thank you. And it's been great. Like now, I couldn't imagine anything different. And I think once, that first 6 months, I just learned so much.
Yep.
And I guess I even coming from brewers, and, like they had always brewed at some point.
Yep.
My mum was always doing weird things, like weird
Yep.
experimental brews.
So
But
she's
I
the
just never
experimentalist when it comes to the brews.
She's the crazy one, yeah.
Yep.
Um, and I just had never really had an interest until I was there. And I was like, why don't more people do this? Like,
Yeah.
why is there such this stigma
Yep.
and this bad reputation around home brewing, especially because like the beers I'm drinking, I'm not a crack a beer every day type of person, but I do enjoy a beer.
Yep.
And I was like, I don't have the palate to be some type of judge and know
Yep.
all my things, but something's either good or it's bad.
Yeah.
Um,
Exactly.
and like they were good. And I was like, why isn't more people doing this? So anyway, I'm was really sidetracked off that one. I'm
Yeah,
not
no,
sure
that's
of
fine.
the exact question, but I hope I answered it.
No, it did. And obviously in 2020, you decided to give home brewing a crack, as you mentioned. Um, not also working for the parents as well at this point, but you decided to really start doing your own home brewing, for lack of a better term. And what was the decision behind that, if you don't mind me asking?
It wasn't necessarily that I decided to do it, it's that I started doing it. Um, Now, whether dad gave it to me as a part of my job because he was like, I just, how good that my daughter makes my beer and I can drink it. Um,
Yep.
or if perhaps I was like, oh, look, I really want to get a better understanding for what you're
Of the
doing. Or
process, etc. Yep.
um, initially, it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to get into this.
Yep.
It was certainly like, oh, I'm interested. Oh, I wouldn't mind playing around with stuff and I wouldn't mind being able to be like, hey, I made this.
Yep.
But it wasn't like, I guess, this beautiful transition of me becoming a brewer and, kind of ending up where you are now.
Yep. No, I get you. I get you. Obviously, everyone has a first brew. Do you remember your first brew? And if so, what style was it and how did it turn out?
So you gave me a heads up on this question. I was genuinely thinking, like, what was the first ever one that I did?
Yep.
And I can't say with absolute certainty, but I think
Mm.
it was Mangrove Jack's Juicy IPA Craft
Okay.
Series kit.
Okay.
Now, I reason I think that is because I had tried some that Dad had brewed.
Hmm.
And I was like, geez, this is great. Now, IPAs are generally not like my first go-to,
Hmm.
but you can't go wrong with Citra hops.
No, you
And
really can't.
that one's got Citra all the way through it. It's dry hopped with 50 grams of Citra.
Yep.
Um, it's a bloody beautiful beer. So from memory, it turned out pretty well. But as you would expect, like it's fairly easy if follow the instructions.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Exactly.
should come with a fairly good beer.
Oh, absolutely. That goes without saying. But it's very hard to, um, for lack of a better term, to fuck up an extract as well. There is obviously a lot of variables that can make things go wrong. For example, one of my first brews was Cooper's Pale Ale. It wasn't my first brew, but it was one of my first. And everything I had done was right by the book, by the instructions on the back of on the tin, all that. The tin was in date. I'd learnt by this point to not use the provided yeast. Obviously, you get your own
Mhm.
fresh yeast, etc. Done everything right, temperature control, all that. And it tasted like off Vegemite when I was done. And there
Yeah,
was no infection,
wow.
there was no oxidation or signs of oxidation either. And it was just friggin' foul. Don't get me wrong, I love Vegemite, but it was just not expecting that. And I'm like, okay, clearly something's gone wrong because it's not supposed to taste like this. I know what Cooper's Aussie Pale Ale tastes like in a bottle.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's going to taste different because it's homebrewed, but it
Yeah.
shouldn't be tasting like that. So things can go wrong in extracts, is what I'm saying, but also it's very, very hard to bug it up because it was still drinkable, but it was just not drinkable in my opinion. My next
Yeah.
question leading into that, off the back of that, is what have been the three biggest mistakes or learning curves, if you learn from them, that you've made in your brewing journey?
Yeah, I think I have been super lucky because not many people start home brewing with their dad or a mentor that's been
Yep.
brewing for majority of your life,
Yep.
right next to them. So I don't think that, and this is very rare,
Yep.
that I don't think I've ever had one beer that's turned bad.
Mm-hmm.
I've had one beer that did get infected,
Okay. And was that
and
through no fault of yours in the process that you did?
that is what I'm claiming because she
Yep.
looked completely fine until Jace, which is dad,
Mm-hmm.
dry hopped her on the weekend when I wasn't in the shop.
Mm-hmm.
And I come in Monday, and lo and behold, we've got a growth on her like I've never seen before.
Wow.
So I suspect that someone didn't sanitize their hop sock as
Yep.
effectively as they should have.
Gotcha.
Um, but yeah, and it's not because I am just freaking great at brewing.
No.
It's really because I've always had, especially when I've got started, I've had someone there. Like I've made silly things. Like the first time I ever used the Firmzilla, it was the
Mm-hmm.
second time that the Firmzilla had been used. So it's one of the pressure fermenters.
Yep.
It was my first time ever using Kveik, and I've boiled the kettle because obviously Kveik you can brew between 30 and 40 degrees.
Yep.
And I've gone, cool, I'm going to put boiling water, top her up, see what she's at, and then I can add a bit more boiling water. And I've put boiling water straight into the base of this fermenter, which if it was like a standard ampy, would have been fine. And this is
Yep.
was my argument of like, anyway, it wasn't fine. I the
Yep.
bottom of this. Anyway, she held out for about 2 years,
Wow.
even with a dipply bottom. So it's just like silly things, and that's just me being naive to
Yep.
whatever plastic was used, and went, no, that is only rated to. I think it was rated to about 60 degrees or
Yep.
something.
And you used a boiling
Um,
kettle of water.
Boiling 100-degree water. So, like that stuff. But in terms of actual brewing, I've never had anything turn out bad. But as well, like when I've possibly wanted to maybe do something that could have turned out bad, or was a little bit ambitious, or I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
add stuff that's, dad kind of ropes me in and he's like, let's tone it. What do you really think? Like, um, let's tone it back. So obviously all the brewing that I do is predominantly for the shop. So
Yep.
we consume it. Um, and Jesse and I like to have a few schooners when we do our fortnightly chat. So my
Yep.
brother and I now do a sit down. We call it the BrewCrew Chronicles every second Wednesday and talk about different things. And we have a few
Yep.
scoos of whatever's on tap. But majority of it is for the shop, people can see what we're brewing, and then it kind of gets shared amongst the three of us.
Yeah, fair. That's really cool. I love that. That's literally a whole vibe. And speaking of the shop as well, last topic, like last question about the shop for now is obviously you have a content page for your home brews and what are called Shari Brew Crew. How and why did that come about? Obviously, I know it's to do with the shop, hence why I segued it into there. But yeah, go ahead.
It actually started as a bit of a piss take. So
Okay. Yep.
probably, I guess coming from you and I are a similar generation,
Yep.
media and videos are really prominent.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'd said to Dad, look, we need to be doing some videos. Like we need to get some content out there, informative content for customers so that like they can learn from it.
Mm-hmm.
Information out there so people can see what home brewing is and potentially, look at getting started or at least perk an interest.
Yep.
Um, and he said, yeah, cool, go on.
You're
And
like,
I went,
pardon,
no.
Dad? You're like, no, don't.
No, and I took a very like kind of stern view that no one would be interested in watching this blonde bird in her 20s talking about homebrew. And I was like, no one's going to listen to me. Like, you need to be the one
Yep.
to, and he's like, no. Anyway, my father is very, I guess, introverted. He can have
Yep.
his extroverted kind of moments. Um,
But he's not getting in
and
front
he
of the
just
camera.
wouldn't. Anyway, so I was in there one day and for whatever reason, I was by myself in the shop and I was putting down a beer
Mm-hmm.
and I just got TikTok. And I thought, oh, I'm just going to make a video, send it to mum and dad as a bit of a piss take.
Yep.
And it was, a joke along the lines of a lot, especially when I started, I would get people come in and say to me things like, oh, can I speak to someone about home brewing, or I've got a question about home brewing. Can I speak to someone, please? And under the guise that I could not answer the questions.
Yep. Yep.
Um, so it was a bit of a joke and play on that. And lo and behold, here I am brewing the boss's beer.
Yep.
Um, and off that, there was a couple of views, and I thought, oh, I wonder, if maybe there's something to this. So I did
Yep.
another video about busting homebrew myths.
Oh, good.
And it
Good
was
idea.
simple things like, homebrewing tastes like shit. Homebrewing's difficult, or, lots of equipment or whatever.
Yep.
And over the coming days, it was just like that TikTok app just went da-ding, da-ding, da-ding.
Yep.
And all of a sudden there was like thousands of people. And I was like, what is this?
Yep.
What have I done?
Yep.
And then it was the occasional like, oh, we might do a video on this, or I would record myself putting a beer down.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it just kind of grew to then it becoming like an actual, I guess, part of my job where I was genuinely creating content for people because they wanted to see new or different recipes. They wanted to have their questions answered. And I
Mm-hmm.
guess questions that were to us in the shop either getting asked all of the time. So
Yep.
that showed that it was a really common theme
Yep.
amongst brewers, or things that seemed really obvious to me,
Yep. Or other
that I
seasoned
guess
home brewers.
yeah, and that just, I guess, weren't. Um, so it was by complete accident. But I think we've hit just about 2 years now
Mm-hmm.
that I've done content for the TikTok. And I guess that then moved on to, there's not a lot of attention done to the Instagram page, but
Mm-hmm.
certainly YouTube, there's a bit more attention done to YouTube over the last 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And Jesse and I are now, got the BrewCrew Chronicles series that,
Mm-hmm.
just addressing stuff that we're seeing, things that we're interested in talking about, similar, I guess, to this conversation,
Mm-hmm.
just to help put content out there to answer questions, to give people ideas. And then by the off chance, people find it and go, geez, what is this home brewing? If those two knuckleheads can do it,
Yep.
anyone can do it.
Yep.
Um,
Absolutely.
And it's not that hard.
It's really not. And it also shouldn't have to be hard either. Um, isn't is one of my, you could say, mottos about home brewing is, if you think it's too hard, you're making it too hard for yourself.
Yeah.
Like, it shouldn't, obviously, gone are the days of the kit and kilo. There's definitely a lot more to it to making a nice brew, but you really only need extract tin, um, either liquid or dry malt extract, and hops to make a nice, tasty beer. Obviously, and filtered water goes without saying. Always filtered water, but you get what I mean. Those three things, or those 3 to 4 things, and depending on the yeast, but that's pretty simple stuff, and you can make a really delicious beer, really drinkable. It's yeah. If you're feeling it's too hard, it's because you're making it too hard for yourself. So it's really, really easy, and I definitely agree
And
with
I
that.
think that was And I think that was from my point of being like, hey, this is something that can actually be really enjoyable.
Mhm.
A lot of our content is made at someone who doesn't want fancy equipment. So personally, I don't use an RO system.
Yep.
I certainly understand the benefits, but I would really like to be able to attract the people who either don't want to get an RO system or don't want to or can't,
Yeah.
whether it be price or where they are or whatever. Certainly, water chemistry plays a very large role.
I'm currently
Um,
running an inline water filter that people use in caravans. It's a carbon filter,
yeah,
and it's only $25 from Autobahn, and it lasts either 12 months or 5,000 liters, depending whichever one happens first.
yeah.
And that's a much cheaper alternative to even buying a benchtop Brita water filter sort of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely agree. Please continue.
But yeah, more so from the point of um, not using the RO and those type of things, just to keep it simple.
Yeah,
You want to go off into that, run. And I
yeah,
will
yeah,
and I will stand there waving my banner going, yes,
yep.
you go, you good
But definitely
thing.
don't use tap water. At least get 10-liter spring water from Coles or Woolies, sort of thing. At least.
You would be disgusted to know that I only use tap water.
Do you really?
Yeah.
Is there an RO filter in the shop?
No.
No? Okay, that's very, very interesting. Okay. But
So
that's good to
I
know
think
though.
as well, it is dependent on where you are.
Of course,
Like
the
I've
town
lived in
water and
certain
whatnot.
places
Yeah.
where
And
you'd
the
really want to be mindful of that. I know even some of our very dedicated all grainers who really play around with their water chemistry
mhm.
don't necessarily actually filter their
Yep.
water. They obviously will do some water chemistry
Like
stuff.
maybe some Campton tablets, sodium metabisulfite,
Yeah.
etc. Yeah.
And like the different nutrients or salts, or I've never actually had a huge interest, so I don't know a lot about it,
I mean,
if
that's
I'm
fair.
honest.
I've honestly not really had a big interest in the chemistry. Just more of a, I've always done, as a rule of thumb, a filter, regardless.
Yeah.
Whether it's a benchtop filter, spring water, RO, etc. Because I did get the town water like report, for lack of a better term. It's definitely not up to scratch here for sure.
And I think the thing that I always come back to customers with is, well, you just have to be happy with it. So
Yeah.
even if people are doing stuff that I'm like, oh, I wouldn't, or I would do this way, I don't have to drink it.
Yeah.
So as long as you're producing a relatively good beer that you're happy with, and I
Yep.
say to them, do a brew this way, do a brew that way. Can you taste the difference? Can you like which one would you prefer to drink?
Mm-hmm.
But certainly the quality of water, depending on where you are, will also play a very large role.
Pardon me. I agree. And my next question, it's obviously about brewing. And as you said, you definitely brew in the shop a lot more. We spoke about this pre-recording. You brew almost exclusively in the shop.
Yep.
Um, but what is your favorite style to brew?
I think when you're brewing simple extracts, like I've heard you speak on your previous episodes about your hazy, adding in your orange juice and those type of things, doing like an oat
It's
milk.
very complex
Um,
compared to the other stuff I've done. This was the first one I did do with orange juice, but usually I just stick to just hopping it for to get that flavor through instead.
Yeah. So I find that brewing extracts, there's not really a lot of difference. When you're only doing extracts,
Yeah.
there's not really a lot of difference in terms of brewing. The only real difference for me is what temperature then am I brewing at?
Yep. And what yeast are you
So
using, sort of thing, I guess, as
that's
well.
right. So obviously, depending on the style, I'm picking a specific yeast, and then
Yep.
my temperature that I'm brewing at is dictated by that yeast.
I only brew
That
with extract as well currently as well.
Yeah, that's really the only difference for me. I don't
Yep.
find, putting
Maybe
down a
hops as
lager.
well.
Yeah, that's right. And then the dry hopping process. But whether you're dry hopping a 15-gram tea bag
Yep.
or whether you're dry hopping 100 grams and putting it in a hop sock, the process is very
Much of a
similar.
muchness. Yeah,
You
very much
know,
so.
so I don't find a huge difference in that. The only kind of one that I've ever brewed that was, I guess, an extra step or so was the Mangrove Jack's coffee hazelnut porter, which I'd mentioned
Hmm.
to you off camera as well.
Hmm.
Um, so that did involve, I guess, having a bit of coffee,
Yep.
mixing in some hazelnut essence. But,
That's
compared
much
to
of a
when you're
muchness, really.
all
That's simple steps that you can still follow.
That's right. Compared to when you're all graining, and I guess you're making your grain bill, and then you're doing, your hop additions at certain times, and
Oh,
that changes.
yeah.
Um,
So complex.
it is a very long process. And I guess especially if you're making your own recipes, there's a lot of forethought that comes into that. But I find in terms of extract brewing, whether you're brewing the most simplest lager to, a ridiculous
A
double
hazy with orange
IPA,
juice because this is done with an extract. Yeah.
the process themselves is very, very simple.
Yeah. It's literally just a matter of how many extra steps you add into it. Example,
That's
you know,
right.
you could, as you said, just add your extract, add your yeast and any hops, and Bob's your sister. Whereas,
Yep.
again, this is the first time I've done like shitloads of steps. I added juice, I added passion fruit pulp, I added hops, which is usual, obviously. I added dextrose. Again, I do that as a rule of thumb. But then, I also added oat. I didn't add oats into it. I strained 1.5 kilo of oats through a sieve with hot water to create, the milk to go in to create the haze because I used a pale ale kit rather than an actual hazy kit, you know. But at the end of the day, it's just adding extra steps, but you can also reduce that and just again create a great beer with extract. And because brewing, circling back to it, I think the theme of this episode is brewing shouldn't be hard. And it really shouldn't be. And so my next question is obviously we had what is your favorite style of beer to brew? And we mentioned and spoke about this next one off air. What is your favorite style of beer to drink?
Yeah. So XPAs.
Yep.
So through and through an XPA, which I feel like is probably almost an obvious answer for someone like myself. But I just love drinking beer that's nice and easy,
Mm-hmm.
that's refreshing. I certainly tend to go for more of a crafty style beer
Mm-hmm.
than a beer that tastes like beer. Don't get me wrong, I think that there's a place for those, and
Mm-hmm.
everyone's taste has a different taste. But I prefer, something that's got a bit of hop to it, something that's super easy drinking and super light and just you can polish off with no issues.
Absolutely. XPA is really freaking good. Like my first experience of a craft, you could say beer. And I'm saying craft because it was before they were bought out by Carlton United Brewery, was a Bolter XPA. Before they went commercial, for lack of a better term. And that got me hooked on craft beer. So I've tried as many different craft beers as I can, but definitely it was a Bolter XPA that got me hooked. And it is still my favorite brew that Bolter does. And that
Yeah.
actually
And it's
comes,
a bloody beautiful beer.
it's a good drop, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that comes to my next topic, obviously. Say you're at a pub, right? Now I'm talking bush pub or, a pub that doesn't have Bolter or Stone and Wood. What beer are you ordering? And you can't go spirits.
I thought all pubs had Stone and Wood because Stone and
They
Wood
do.
would be
They do now.
my.
They do now. But like, say you're going backwards. Like, I actually went to a pub in Victoria about a year and a half ago now in Durham. They had was literally 4x gold, 4x bitter, VB, Furfies, um, Great Northern, and two is new and two is old. That was it.
Yeah,
There was
right. So
nothing.
my
So
my
those
next
sort of
thing
ones.
is if I was had to go for like a beer, it's going to be
Yeah.
Great Northern,
Yeah.
preferably Super Crisp if they've got
Yes.
Great
Yep.
Northern Super Crisp.
Yep.
But I will deal with the original if I have to.
Yeah. Fair. I agree as well. But yeah, I was stumped to find that this place, but then again, this town literally had a population of 120. So it doesn't surprise
Yeah.
me. But at the same time, it's like, geez, at least get Stone and Wood. Surely. At
Well,
least
you're
Stone and
lucky they even had Furphy on tap, to be
Yeah,
honest.
that's very true. But Furphy is very popular in Victoria. So
Yeah, okay.
yeah, like basically you can't the from what I've noticed, because I've been to a few shindigs down in Victoria last year, everyone had a bottle of Furfies in their hand, more so than a
Really?
bottle of VB or a bottle of yeah. It's the go to at the bottle. Or more so if they're not craft beer drinkers, they're going for a Furfies. It's very interesting.
Wow.
Um,
I would say
yeah,
Great Northern has the monopoly here in Queensland.
absolutely, it does. Yep,
Well, from what I have
I
seen,
reckon it would. I lived in Tweed Heads for about 2 years
yeah,
recently, and it has the monopoly in that area as well.
yeah. It's a good beer.
It
It's a
is.
good, easy drinking. It's a beer that tastes like beer, and they do it well.
Yeah, and people are going to shame me because I haven't said this on the interview with the homebrewer before, but I actually really love Great Northern's 0% beers.
Do you? So I
Yeah.
actually had some of those, and I don't know what happened to them because I never tried them.
Mm.
I heard the Great Northern's zeros were actually one of the worst compared to some
Wow.
of the other zeros on the market.
Okay, maybe maybe they've changed their recipe, but last time I had their zeros, it was about 2 or so years ago now. And the only other options were you had Heineken zeros and you had
Yeah.
Carlton zeros at the time. This was about 6 months before the big boom of every company bringing out their zeros. And of those three, for me personally, Great Northern was next level compared to those two. I'm sure better beer with their 0% and all the other brands and breweries are a lot better now. But at the time, Great Northern was second to none. It genuinely tasted like I was having a regular Great Northern, just a little bit different. Um, and
Yeah,
I
right.
froth it like I will. There will be times where I won't drink at all, but I'll still want to have a beer, and I will genuinely go get a 6 pack of the 0%. Um, but I've also found nowadays of doing mocktails at home in the sense of going to my local brew shop, getting some essences, some bourbon essences or whatever, and just mixing it with Pepsi Max. Yeah.
100%. And people doing like not even just like your bourbon and
Mm.
Coke. We've got a couple of people that do full blown cocktails.
Oh wow.
Um, and I think it's awesome. Like we've certainly used them as well in beers. So like the
Mm-hmm.
hazelnut porter.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Ginger beer is one that I love using it in.
Yep.
We did a lime ginger
Yum.
beer,
Yep.
which wasn't one of my favorites, but it was one, Mum loved it.
Yep.
We've done a dark spiced rum. We've done a spiced whiskey.
Ooh.
And
Yum.
it's really, so one, I guess it amplifies it and kind of, makes it a bit more fun or a bit
Mm-hmm.
more flavor. But also really good for people who enjoy things like dark and stormies or but don't want to be mixing an alcoholic ginger beer
Yeah.
with a 30 ml shot of rum, which is,
Fine.
each their own. Some people are like, whatever, like I just want all that I can get.
Yep.
But for people having options, it's really good as well.
Oh, absolutely. And so my next question is obviously still drinking beer. What is the style of beer you're currently drinking at the moment, whether it's right now or, what's your current go-to beer?
Yeah, so for our own beers,
Hmm.
I have just done my first ever session IPA.
Ooh, okay.
So Jesse and I are having a little bit of sibling rivalry at the
Hmm.
moment, and we're both as arrogant as one another, thinking that.
Is he doing the same brew or is it a different one?
So he decided to do a pale ale.
Okay.
We could have kept in, I guess, on the same style. The
Hmm.
reason that I wanted to go for a session is they already had two pails on tap.
Okay.
That would have been a third. Mine would have been a fourth.
Yeah,
Um,
that's too
and I
many.
was like, let's do something different. Like we've got, like 6 or 7 different pale ale recipes.
Hmm.
We'd never done a session IPA.
Hmm.
We don't have many IPA recipes that we've actually done. There's only a handful. And I just thought, yeah, why not do something different? So yeah, mine is a session IPA. I
Hmm.
dry hopped it with 75 grams of what did I do? Eldorado, Azikar, and Galaxy.
Ooh, that sounds really
Um,
nice.
yeah, I used the Morgan's Frontier IPA
Yep, that's a good
can.
kit. Yep.
And I used, we call it, what do we call it? I can't quite remember, but basically it's a 500-gram bag of
Hmm.
fermentable. So it's a
Yep.
mix of Dex, multidextrin, and light dry malt.
Yep.
Um,
So
so
kind of
I,
like the equivalent of like Cooper's Brew and 2 for anyone that may not get a reference point.
yep, but a 500-gram bag. So
Yes,
I'm not
yes.
sure. I think that
They
one
do
is
a
a
kilo,
kilo
yeah.
bag. Yeah. So that is what I've been drinking when I've been popping in there. Jesse, what we're drinking, well, it'll be a mix. So I'll be drinking that plus Jesse's pale ale. So his pale ale, he utilized Morgan's pale ale
Hmm.
can.
Another good
He
kit.
used, I believe, their pale unhopped malt,
Okay,
and
yep.
he dry hopped with 75 grams of Amarillo,
Yep.
Galaxy, and Mosaic.
Ooh, interesting
Um,
combo.
yeah, so the one big difference, which I think is will be interesting for your audience, is I
Hmm.
used Mangrove Jack's West Coast yeast.
Okay, yeah,
So
wow.
we've kind of gone off on a tangent, but I think that
No, no,
it's
it's a vibe.
interesting.
It is.
Now Jesse used Mangrove Jack's hop head yeast. So
Okay.
I would have really preferred to use the hop head,
Hmm.
but I couldn't run the risk of him saying that I was copying him.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Now having two beers that the only like obviously an IPA can, even though it's an extract, it's very different to what the pale can
Hmm.
would be.
Yep.
In terms of, I guess like hops that are used, um, when they've been put in and for how long and how much.
Hmm.
But the aroma, and granted, they'd only sat in the keg for about a week,
Hmm.
but the aroma of Jesse's beer was so much stronger
Yep.
than what was off my IPA.
And that's down to the yeast,
And
more or
the
less.
100%. And that just goes to show how effective. So, Hophead has obviously been formulated to bring out all of that flavor and aroma
Yep.
from your hops, and it has performed.
Yeah, wow.
Even just to the nose, the difference in the aroma is so obvious.
Okay, and so you said you're
Um,
doing a sibling rivalry sort of video. Is that tomorrow that it releases at time of recording? So obviously I'll pop the link in the video up here for people to see it, or will it be not available by that point?
Yeah, so I'll probably aim to get it out so today's Friday the 29th. So I'll
Yep.
hopefully have it out by Monday the
Yep.
2nd. So
Well, that's when this
tomorrow
episode
is
airs on Monday, so that works out well.
perfect. So tomorrow is our taster. So we've
Okay.
got
Is it going to
so
be
we the
live
two
streamed?
of us. Well, that's an idea. I hadn't thought
Mm.
about it.
Maybe
Maybe I
live stream it on
will live
TikTok.
stream
Yeah.
it.
I
But
know I'd
we've
love to
got
see it.
a few selective customers coming in, and then obviously anyone who's in the store at that
Yeah.
time will be able to taste it. They can all have a vote.
Hmm.
And while I don't think it's going to put our sibling rivalry to bed,
Hmm.
it'll definitely give one of us bragging rights
Yeah.
coming up
And
to
maybe make it a yearly
Christmas.
thing.
Yeah, so we do have something in the works, potentially for a brew competition, um, at some point next year, which we're kind of working on. I think it'll be really exciting.
Hmm.
Um, I think that we need to keep our rivalry at bay, otherwise, God knows what can happen. But certainly, hopefully, the verdict will be in tomorrow, and then within the next week or so, we'll have a video go up on that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Because I saw the post about it earlier today, and I'm like, yeah, can't wait. And that's why I was like, I wonder if it'll be live streamed. But if it's not, that's fine. The link to the video will be in the description because by the time this episode drops, the video will be more or less out. And if it's not, check back in this video, anyone that's watching, in a day's time, 2 days' time, to see if the link is in the description by this point. And also, go and follow Shari on TikTok while you're at it, so that way you can get notified once the video is up as well. And subscribe to her on YouTube and click that bell as well. And while you're at it, do the same for this channel. Now, next question is obviously, as you mentioned and alluded to earlier, that you've been blessed by growing up around your dad homebrewing and working at the brew shop as well. What's the best piece of advice you've ever been given about homebrewing?
I think it was just give it a crack. Don't overthink it. Certainly, I'm very methodical. Like, I like to make sure everything's done right.
Hmm.
I have to know every single step and why you're doing it. And it's kind of like just leave that at the door and just give it a go.
Yeah.
Um, and then I guess once you give it a go and you dive in, once again, it's not that hard.
No, it's not. And that's great. And um, that ties in with my next question, which is what are three bits of advice you would give to new and fresh homebrewers?
First of all, yeah, don't overcomplicate it. Don't get scared off because you've watched some videos or you've done your research and you're worried that you need this piece of fandangle equipment, or you've watched my videos and I'm using a pressure fermenter, and as you will be soon as well, and it's like, what is that? you know I need one of those. You don't,
You don't.
get yourself a starter kit.
Yep.
It has
Available from
everything.
Crafted Taste up in Queensland, and they
Yeah.
do ship in on Australia wide, I'm pretty sure.
Or head to your local home brew shop.
Yep.
Like, we are certainly not ones to have them see your local home brew shop.
Brick Road, pardon. Sorry. I'm kidding. That will be edited
Most
out, of
of
course.
Most of your homebrew shops are going to be owned by families just like us that
Hmm.
want to help walk in. My preference has always been Morgan starter kits, but I know that there are other ones out on the market. They have everything you need. Crack open a video, watch us put a beer down. I've got a couple of videos of opening up a starter kit, putting a beer down. What does it look like? And just give it a go. Number two, do have a little bit of a thought.
Yes.
Don't be in Queensland where it's been 30 degrees all week and
Yep.
think that you're going to chuck it out in your garage.
Mhm.
Do a little bit of research and, consider either an appropriate yeast for the temperature you're at, or finding somewhere or
A
somehow
cool,
to
dry
keep it
place
a
if you
bit
don't have temperature
cooler.
control. Yeah.
Yeah. And then what would my third piece of advice be? Don't take too much advice.
Yes. Great.
Almost
Great.
don't
Great piece of advice.
complicate it. That's, I guess, another reason why we started doing, or why I started doing what I was doing, because there was so much conflicting
Yep.
information. Now, I'm
So
not
much
saying that
conflicting.
I'm right by
No.
any stretch, but what I do works for us.
Yep.
take my advice or leave it, or, and I think the advice that I try and offer is trying to keep it as simple as possible. So, don't get swamped down with all of us sitting on the internet preaching that we know what we're doing.
No, we
We were
we only
all,
we only know what we're doing, as in the sense of we only know what we're doing works for us, not that
yeah,
it'll work for you. Yeah,
yeah, that's right. Take what you can, leave what doesn't, and just get out there and give it a crack.
honestly, that's great advice. And honestly, very interesting and different advice to the previous guests I've had so far. The only one of those that is, you could say, the running theme, because all the others have said different ones, mainly said water, etc. But all of them, including yourself, did say temperature control or find the best, cool, dry place again. So again, temperature control, because that is very paramount. But all again, those three bits of advice were absolutely incredible. But I do have quick fire questions for you before we
Yeah,
wrap it up with a few extra questions. First one is, what is your favorite hop to use?
Galaxy.
Yep, absolutely agreed. And what's your least favorite hop to use?
I'm going to butcher this, so I hope
Yep.
I pronounce it correctly. But Nelson Savon,
Okay.
Savon,
Yep.
I, re, I, it's the wine notes. So if you want to
Yep.
look up the profile, it gives off a bit of wine notes. Now, sometimes I've had it in one beer that Jesse did.
Mm-hmm.
I could definitely taste it, but it wasn't as prominent as what I've tasted before. It just doesn't sit right with me.
Fair. For myself, it's Waiti and Rawaka. I just not a fan of them.
You don't like the Wahiti,
No, not a fan. No, but
really?
definitely more so Rawaka than Waiti, I will say.
I haven't used that one before.
I would recommend against it, but obviously you got to learn your own way. Obviously, so brew with it if you want, but it definitely makes or breaks the beer. Black Rock in particular make a crafted series, and it's a Rawaka pre-hopped kit, which is fine. But they also provide Rawaka extra hops to add into it, and
Yep.
it feels very earthy. It feels like I'm drinking dirt. Is the flavor
Okay.
that it gives, yeah. And I'm not that kind of vibe. Um, but Waiti, I haven't mastered using that yet. That's why I'm not the biggest fan of it. But I know people who definitely don't like Sabro, and I don't know why they don't like Sabro. I love it. I love
Right.
Sabro.
I think actually coming back to your favorite hop,
Yep.
and you've used it in this one, Nectron.
Yeah, I
So in
love Nectron.
terms of,
I've only just used it for the first time in this brew, and I'm a convert. I'm gonna literally order a kilo or two in the next few days.
so it's a relatively new hop.
Yep.
In terms of hops, it's the new girl on the block.
On the nose,
I
if you open a packet, it smells like Solo, like a can of Solo. Like,
Right.
yeah.
So I haven't experienced the actual hops yet,
Okay.
but Jesse did a Nectron hopped XPA. And
Oh,
as
that would have
much
been
as it
good.
pains me to say it, it is the best beer I
Yep.
have ever tried. It
Nectron
was
is
just,
so good.
it's it's just like it's like no other hop.
Yeah,
Like
it's
I
crazy.
think that, in 5 or 10 years when people are talking about hops, it's going to be the new Citra.
It'll
It's
literally be
going,
you'll go Citra, Nectron, Galaxy as the combo or something like that. Yeah.
and it's just, it doesn't give off a lot of bitterness. If anything, there was, and I
No
said to him, like,
bitterness.
I'm getting
Yep.
sweetness.
Yep.
I was really surprised with how much sweetness was coming through. And, I knew the tins that he'd brewed it with. I'd have brewed them before. Um, the finishing gravity was very low, like he
Hmm.
didn't finish it too early. So the only contributing factor could have been the Nectron. And
Yep.
I just went like, mate,
Yeah.
you have done it.
Yeah. It is a
You
great hop. I
beautiful.
it's I'm getting goosebumps. It's so good. It really is. I've heard a lot about it. Um, and one of my mates sent me a 250 gram cryovac like packet of it just to give it a run. Um,
Yeah.
and I was like, right, well, obviously I'm not going to use 250 grams of it in one brew. So I was like, right, I'll separate it 100, 150. Um, and yeah, I ran 100 grams of it with 100 grams of Citra. And oh, it's so friggin' good. I will definitely be
Yeah.
running it in probably my IPA that I'm about to drop. And which brings
Yeah.
me to my next question. I have two more. I have two final questions for you. What brew? Obviously, you've got one coming up in the. You've done an IPA, but what is the next brew that you're going to do? If you know.
I have been really playing around with the idea of doing a sour, um, or doing a
I reckon Necron would
wheeze.
go well with a sour.
Yeah, right. Like think
Yeah.
passion fruit sour or mango
Yeah.
sour,
Ooh.
you
Yep.
know.
Yep.
I would really like to, because what are we? End of November, early December.
Yep.
We've still got, especially here in Queensland, 2, 3 months of pretty warm weather.
Yep.
Um, I've done Mangrove Jack's Berliner Wheeze before, but I would really like to give a sour or a wheeze basically from not complete scratch because we're still using extract cans,
Mm-hmm.
but using either fruit juice or frozen fruit.
Yep.
Um, yeah, I
Well,
think
well,
that is
if you're going with
really
juice, not paid by this company, but the juice I used in this, is East Coast Juices. I don't know if they stock up in Queensland, because they are a Central Coast based company, but they're in Woolies, they're in IGAs, so surely they might be nearby. But they are
yeah.
one of not the only, but one of the only juice companies, for lack of a better term, that every one of their juices is unpreserved. It's 100% juice, which is obviously
And
key
that
for brewing.
100%, if you're going to brew with juice, no matter whether it's wine, whatever you're doing,
Mm-hmm.
make sure there's no artificial anything
Yep.
plus preservatives in there because it
Literally
will really mess
every
with it.
absolutely every single juice that they provide, they do have a preserved version, but they also have the unpreserved option as well. And
Yeah,
obviously goes without saying.
nice.
So if they are available up there, check your Coles, check your Woolies, check your IGA.
Yeah.
But if not, you can, I'm pretty sure, place an order like online. For if and when that comes around, they do passion fruit juice, they do orange and mango, orange and passion fruit, like all kinds of. They do lemon, lime, a bit of everything, really. Obviously, because they're a juice company.
We
Um,
should also link that in the description of the
Oh,
video.
oh, absolutely, we will. Not a paid ad, but you know what? If they want to pay me, I won't say no. Yeah, absolutely great. And my final question for you, Shari, is what's next for Shari and Shari Brew Crew and Crafted Taste Homebrew Supplies?
Yeah, so I guess at this point, I don't have any huge extravagant plans. Certainly giving, I guess, the YouTube channel a little bit more attention, and just focusing on, very similar content to what we've done tonight,
Mm-hmm.
just to get more information
Out there.
out there.
Yep.
Um, we've always done kind of a yearly new merch release.
Mm-hmm.
So we're kind of, entering that point again,
Mm-hmm.
um, which is really exciting. So there could be some new merch coming.
Keep an eye on
Um,
the website of Crafted Taste Homebrew
for
Supplies.
BrewCrew, yeah.
Yep.
But at this point, no crazy plans. We're just going to keep plodding along the way that we're going. Keep putting information out there, and if people want other information or more specific information, or want us to cover certain things, and then that's what we're going to do.
Yeah, Ripper. One sec.